Welcome back to the PFC Podcast. The views and opinions you are about to hear are the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the PFC Podcast. This is Dennis, and today I'm with Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So,
good to be back again.
Hey, well, it's my pleasure to have you back on. We did a podcast a while ago on mission planning, mission prep, and I would like to go that one next step further in kind of explaining, especially for new guys or people who just haven't been in that position before. Planning is always one thing. When you get on the ground, things sometimes are different, right? So,
absolutely.
I would like to take that kind of next step. So maybe if we could just do like a quick recap of what of some of the tidbits that we talked about in the last one, and then let's talk about what happens when you finally get on the ground.
No, happy to do it. Yeah, this is important, especially for guys that are new to getting overseas and new to stepping into other countries and such. Like you said, Dennis, we talked a little bit. We talked about education on the last one. We talked a little bit about pre-deployment research and intelligence preparation of the battlefield, or just preparing. So let's talk in just recapping some of that. Obviously, mission analysis is a huge thing, and I think that we're getting a lot better at that here in recent years as we got out of Iraq and Afghanistan and started realizing that there's a big, broader world out there. We also talked a little bit about training, and my key word for training is assessment. Assessment in order to get you where you want to go. But principles of pre-effort planning and preparation, and I know people have heard this before. It's the 6 P's, about less colorful, right? Proper prior planning prevents poor performance, and if you think about it, planning and preparation is 80% of our success in the medicine field. I think medicine tends to be extremely reactive, but in this case, we have to be proactive. We can't just think about treatments or reacting to a situation. You have to think about the safety officer and having that safety net and the built-in infrastructure in order to react when things do go bad. So really, asking yourself questions are real essential in that beginning. What do I know? What do I think I know? What do I need to know? It's the facts and assumptions of MDMP or OLPP. We have to be real critical again with that in our mission analysis. Normal military doctrinal terms, and it's true for humanitarians, it's true for government agencies, it's true for embassies. That intelligence preparation of the battlefield, gaining the most important information that you need before you're setting yourself into country, and getting as much of that background in the area study, the medical reports, the facility surveys, the reports from the team or effort that's gone on beyond you before that is important. I think as we become more and more international all the time due to geopolitics, finding that common language is real important for guys and girls as well. Understanding not only the doctrinal stuff, but if you walk the walk, you have to talk the talk. And using the same language, and the same language meaning the same thing, is important. And soft too often thinks that we've got an out on that, but we don't. We need to know the language better than the conventional side, better than the diplomatic side, better than the political side, in order to do our job effectively. And whether it's just common mission language like facts, assumptions, limitation, restrictions, stated tasks and implied tasks, or the civilian versus military, host nation versus humanitarian, we need to see things as they see those things as well. Think about a little bit, remember your national medical environment. Very often, and it's not just Americans, but every nation goes into another nation thinking that their medical infrastructure is like theirs, and it's never is. Absolutely not. 32 nations in NATO right now, not a single medical structure, medical tradition, ethics, regulations, scopes of practice, history, none of it's the same. And they all live right beside each other, just like our states here in America. So the character of the medical community where you are going, what key education they actually get, what does their residency programs look like compared to ours. You have to have that in-depth, the devil's in the details. You have to have that in-depth understanding. In pre-mission planning, and please jump in here if I'm going on tangents, Dennis. In that pre-mission planning, plan by phase, yeah, and it's planning either chronologically or by events or by dates or by efforts, and maybe that's already dictated to you in the larger operations order or plan. But planning by phase gives you a more simple, more structured, more understandable means of execution, especially, when times are hard and you need to move quickly. People recognize planning by phase, they understand that structure, and it should come natural and make things simple when times are stressful. It's also professional, recognized by peers. And like I said, it can fall into that larger order. That way, the medical plan falls into the operations plan, and it's not a separate entity by itself. When we're talking about medical planning, I think people can very easily get stuck on that single slide in an operations order. Hey, who's giving treatment? What's my evacuation method? The destination and my time to distance. And I'm good. And that's it. That's not it. That's just what the operations office gets. That's just what the TOC gets. That's just what that planner gets in order to try to resource your success when you're treating patients and moving them out. One thing about medical evacuation, I always asked, especially my operational sergeant's major, is how do you want me to plan? Do you want me to plan by the best case scenario or the most likely use, or do you want me to plan by the worst case scenario? And to a person, it was always, hey, plan by the worst case scenario, because it's always easier to downshift than it is to upshift. If you plan by most likely use or easiest use, then you're not planning for the worst case scenario. You have to plan for the worst case scenario every single time. So like I said, always plan for that worst case scenario. It's always easier to downshift, and it always makes things easier for people that are trying to resource your success. Remember, as medics, planners, or physicians, it's always our job to make other people's jobs easier. And that medical plan fitting into the operations plan, making sure it doesn't frustrate the training or operational environment, it doesn't confuse it, it doesn't risk assets. Remember, a medevac is never free. It always costs something: time, effort, coordination, frustration, complication. So it's our job to make other people's jobs easier. And again, planning by that worst case scenario will help you be able to do that. But again, just going back to that slide that's too often seen and leaned upon by giving treatment, evacuation method, destination, time, and distance. If you lay these out on a chart side by side, just like you see them, which one is the first one you would use? But not linearly, right? Every single section. The second one that you would use, whether it be, who's the first guy that you would want to give treatment closest to the patient? Who's the second guy that would be given treatment closest to the patient? Who's the third guy? Look at them as each entities instead of linear left to right across that medevac cart. This reason, by doing this, it gives you not 4 treatment plans, but basically 32 options on which you can choose whatever situation you find yourself in. And that's where the real flexibility comes from: a really good PACE plan and medevac plan, because you're not looking at 4 plans. You're looking at about 32 different options that you can choose from best to worst case criteria. And that's where the medic really finds, his potential out of that PACE plan. Any thoughts on that? On that yourself?
I mean, my thoughts. I've never seen anybody do it. It was my first thought. The plan is, especially like just an example, like area assessments, right? You call up to hire to get some historics because we're planning on going somewhere, and you get your stack, and it turns out that the area assessment from last year looks like a lot like the one 2 or 3 years ago, which looks like a lot like the one that's like 5 or 6 years ago. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. I think somebody just cut and pasted.
Yeah.
And essentially, you have to start from zero.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's been assuming all of these things. And so I would just caution the young guys coming up. You might have to do this from zero, and your elders in the unit might not know how to do this necessarily. So if you had to reach out to somebody like higher, right? What kind of section would you go to? Just like the battalion, the group, would you just work your way up the chain until you get to somebody who's actually a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are really good points. That legacy rotational handoff is a risk, and it's a total assumption. It's not a fact. You make it a fact once you get on the ground and you verify all of those locations. That's when you take ownership and you take stewardship of that medical plan. And we'll talk a lot about that later. But yes, to your point there, you dovetailed us perfectly into, yes, if you cannot find the solutions on your own, then you move it up the chain to battalion, go to your battalion doc. You usually don't have a planner at battalion. If necessary, go to group or go to regiment or go to that level of command and go to the med planner there and get that information. Remember, there are some key events too that happen before JSETs or mobile training teams or whatever the case may be. A pre-deployment site survey is really critical. And being able to get on that pre-deployment site survey, that PDSS, might not always happen for the medic, but he can provide critical RFIs, critical requests for information or questions, as a civilian once told me. We call those questions. Those critical RFIs that are going to enable you to never fail your mission. And that's the minimum information requirements you should have before stepping into that country if you are not able to go onto that PDSS. If you're able to go on that PDSS, easy day, because you'll get 99% of the answers before you even come into country when you're actually rotating that. But again, going back to what you mentioned, Dennis, the higher scope of this, the regional medical evaluation. Again, I'll go back just a little bit. You have to understand your environment. You have to understand their structure, their scale, and their scope. And in a lot of those medical systems might be multinational. You might have an allied support system in there. You might have a host nation support system in there. You might have your own nation support system in there. So you're really working with 3 different systems there. And as the medic, you're responsible for knowing each one of those 3 systems. That's just part of your job. And again, I'll go back to, it's not always reactionary. It has to be proactive. You have to be that safety officer. Again, look at your sources of information. You've got free sources of information. You've got paid, open sources of information, like OSINT. And then you've got just word of mouth. There's a lot of businesses out there that can sell you medical intelligence. And we talked a little bit before the difference between information and intelligence. Medical intelligence is that intelligence, that's information that's analyzed and validated. It's no longer an assumption. It's an actual fact now again. You can do more creative research, and in a lot of third world nations, you might not get specific information online or in open source research on a specific facility. A trick I learned a long time ago from some very gifted people, just, hey, go to social networking. Social networking in the larger space is the number one means by transferring news and information right now. It's no longer by media outlets or any other way of gaining information. Social networking is the number one piece. So go to the social network and look up the doc, look up the facility, look up the quality of the reviews in there, and you should get a good sense of that facility, their capabilities, the competence and education of their doctors, their opening closures before you even get into that. Just again, I want to recap, if I could, on that PDSS. Again, area study, medical study, IPB, intelligence preparation of the battlefield in that operating space. There's usually a really good PDSS checklist that's unit internal, or you can get it through MedCom or deployment medicine that you can use just to give you that 80% solution on places that you're going on. Medevac, case evac plans, what medical assets are there? And again, we talked about being multinational. They can also be multi-service. They can be SOF plus ground, general purpose forces plus naval forces plus coalition plus host nation. It's complicated. And it's the medic's job to simplify that and understand it and be able to execute it and provide recommendations to the commander as easily as possible. In that PDSS, you can identify those specialized capabilities. And that means visiting those healthcare treatment facilities. A treatment facility can say, hey, we have a CT scanner. Yes, we have a CT capability. And you go there, and that CT scanner has been down for 30 days. And that's just changed your neurological evacuation plan completely. So again, never base your plans off of assumptions, base them off of facts. And those facts only come from you verifying those locations straight into that. And now it comes again from, I said it before, and I apologize for repeating myself, but planning and preparation is 80% of your success. It gives you confidence. It gives you understanding. Planning gives you comfort. It gives you purpose. And it's just an important piece that I think we too often probably don't devote enough time and effort on. And I'm sure you've seen that a little bit yourself, Dennis, in your past.
Yeah. I mean, point of fact, I don't even know why we do all this medical planning, because I've been trained to hold on to anybody, regardless of injury, for 96 hours. And exactly. In some point in that 96 hours, somebody will figure out what to do, and they'll just come rescue me, right?
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, that's almost the assumption that happens until it doesn't.
Until it doesn't, right?
Until it doesn't, right? Exactly. And again, 80% of your success is in that preparation and planning, and you've just got to do it. There's no choice in it, and it is critical. But there's a lot of really good tools out there that you can use too. And this is a little bit PDSS work, but it's also, when you get into country, a common operating picture, a COP. That's true for the operational side. That's true for the communication side. It's true for the logistics side. It's also true for the medical side. And we often refer to this as the footprint, but it basically gives you essential elements of friendly medical information. What facilities there are in your area, what's their distance to you on normal platforms, what is their contact information, what is their grids, and their locations and their addresses. And that is meant to give you that starting picture and understanding of your environment on which you can operate on. Now, none of that, again, I would agree and state that none of that exists unless you confirm it. And at a very minimum, if best case scenario, you actually go to that location and look at it and visit it and shake hands and look at approaches, look at access points, ask them questions, but be friendly while you're doing it, obviously. But at the same time, that's going to come into your hospital and facility surveys. Again, critical, because that's passive information collection, and that's something that you should be giving the next guy that or girl that comes in behind you, and you should be also relaying back to the embassy. You should be relaying that back to your special operations command or your medical commands in order to update and keep current that information. Again, that's part of our job to do that, is prep that operational environment for the next person that comes in. If you can't reach those locations, one thing that we used to, beat into our medics, our new medics, when they came into the organization, was once you go into an area and you're especially about to do some type of operation or training that increases of risk, you call these facilities. And if you can't get a hold of them, they don't exist. Okay. So again, if you can't get a hold of them, then they don't exist. Do not even include them in your medical plan. And that just makes things easier for you. It makes things easier for the TOC and the J3 or the S3 when they're trying to resource and execute your medical plan because you're forward on the ground. So just keep it simple. Base your short-term medical plans on facts and never, ever assumptions. So you spoke a little bit of, actions on entry, and I think we're at that point now. Getting that prior mission reconnaissance of the area is critical, and that's true for patrols. That's true for civil affairs programs. That's true for anything going into a country and meeting the embassy country team or anything. But getting that prior mission reconnaissance of the area. What was the team prior to you? What was their plan of experience? And then, as you stated, get that handover from them. And be real critical. Hold them to it. Don't just take it, say thank you, and walk away, and put it in your backpack until you get into country. As you said, very too often, it's the same med plan that just gets turned over and over and over again. And it's our responsibility to confirm that. And I'd like to give just a real quick experience on that. And I wasn't on site. I was actually in Overwatch or in the JOC trying to take care of this issue, but basically in a very austere location in a semi-permissive environment, we had a medic turn over to another medic, and 2 weeks probably went by. But during the turnover, the medic was like, "Hey, there's this humanitarian surgical element, 12 clicks away. They'll take care of anything you need to. If you have any urgent casualties, they should be able to assist you." Medics, "Hey, great, thank you, perfect." What was the first mistake he made was he didn't assess and clarify that was actually an asset. So about 4 weeks went by, and had one of the staff members show up feeling sick, just not feeling right, not malaise, but just couldn't identify really what the issue was. Medic did a good history, did a good exam, really could not find anything. Meant to check on him, follow up in 24 hours, went 36 hours and ended up finding the gentleman pretty much laid out in hypovolemia. He had a tumor, undiagnosed tumor rupture. So the medic did what he did, and he grabbed the guy, treated him, got some IV access, supportive care, packaged him up, and took him to that humanitarian site. And the humanitarian site said, "Hey, I'm sorry. He's a government official. I can't do surgery. I can give you blood, but I can't do surgery. It's not in my mandate." And that was a bad outcome. And that just came by and from the medic not doing his job and confirming his assets and resources inside of his medical plan. So hard lessons learned at cost there. And hopefully those that come behind us won't make those same mistakes. Anything to add to that?
I mean, it happens time and time again. Like, people make assumptions, and then those assumptions end up burning you, because it just seems like the perfect answer. Like, yeah, right next door, they have a full surgical suite. Life is good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it just turns out like you just can't use it.
Yeah,
regardless
absolutely.
how close or far it is, like you just can't.
Yes, sir.
So assumptions always burn people.
You learn a lot from that too. I remember another medic being in an austere location and looking at his number one facility, host nation facility for taking the partner force, and went into the OR just to see the OR, and as expected in a low resource country. But he found this box, and it had a closed circuit gas system to it with 2 pumps. And he's like, "What is this?" And he took a picture of it, and it was a draw-over machine. And he had just never seen that before, but that was their primary means of anesthesia. So again, visiting those facilities will give you a great amount of insight, a great amount of understanding that are ultimately going to have a basis for your patient care. So you must visit and validate all locations. And when you do that, contact numbers, capabilities. Is it a teaching hospital? Teaching hospitals are always better because you know that they should have a more residential program, and they're going to have more staff, and they're likely going to be open for 24 hours. Blood bank information is critical. How are they screening their blood, and what are they screening their blood for? How much blood do they have on hand? their specialty access, your neurosurgeons or your vascular surgeons that are becoming so critical in our conflict areas right now, your orthopedic surgeons that are becoming so critical in our conflict areas now. Do they have these specialties, and will you have access to them, or only at certain times? And here's a further question. What is an orthopedic surgeon to them? It's probably not an orthopedic surgeon to our definition, or to a British definition, or to a French definition. So again, must confirm everything. So
yeah. And I mean, like you mentioned, like blood testing, if that unit or facility is not to the standard that we would like to have to make it usable, I mean, it could be as simple as, a GPC from somebody to get them to that standard. And now we've done a humanitarian thing, a civil project.
Absolutely.
While on top of that, augmenting our own medical capabilities. Yeah,
absolutely. And to be honest with you, it's happening. I mean, that intent, with global health engagement is happening in the Pacific right now. When we look at hospitals in the Philippines or other key geographic locations there, hey, if we can increase the capabilities, but most importantly, the capacities of some of these host nation countries, then ultimately, in the worst case scenario, we can stage or care for allied personnel there. So exactly the same thought, Dennis. Absolutely. One thing I found always real important too, especially for maybe not the bigger picture, the time in country or the total JSAT time, but maybe it's a certain operation or a certain high risk training venue, is just having a running sketch of your facilities and your plan. And that's just a simple graphic that anybody can understand, and it makes things easier in your own mind. It's essentially like we talked about a common operating picture before, a COP. It's essentially your own thing, but it's very similar to a COP. It's the time and distance on whatever platforms that you might be using to the medical facilities in your medical plan. And one great thing about a running sketch, and you'll see it in any operations plan or any operations doctrine on how to learn how to do this, a running sketch helps you gain insight into how easy it is to obtain your treatment goals. So if you want to medic on a patient within 0 minutes, immediately. If you want that patient to have blood within 30 minutes, and if you want him to have hands-on by a surgeon within 1 hour, a running sketch will help you find those solutions. So doing a running sketch is pretty critical too as well, especially for those one-off missions or one-off high-risk training events, just to make sure that you are finding those devils in the detail, and you're being proactive on your work, and you're mitigating all your risk.
Yeah. And I would definitely advise not just using Google Maps or Google Earth to get distances from your place to that place, because like weather has a say, terrain has a say, the population has a say.
Absolutely.
And, just like you get angry at the traffic on your way home, like traffic happens everywhere around the world.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. And it's funny, well, you bring up weather. There's a reason that weather is in the enemy paragraph of, 5-paragraph order. It's because it can be the enemy. The other piece I just wanted to mention, you just reminded me, was when you go and visit these medical facilities, they might tell you, don't come here. We cannot have your nation. We cannot have you as an American in this facility, or it will cause a riot. I have actually had that happen. So again, that will give you that essay and that understanding, the situational awareness and understanding that could happen, and just throw a wrench into your plans if you do not confirm them. Our job to confirm.
Yeah. And you could almost have like the flip side of that. You're asking, one, can we use this? Two, like how many, if we can, how many can we take, right?
Absolutely.
And your answer is like, yes, just come, right?
Yeah.
Let's say they're wide open, like they're more than willing to treat our guys, and you're looking around the facility, like how can you, if they're just telling you, yes, we can take them all, that's not always realistic for what they have. So like just space wise, like, hey, this is our treatment area. Like, how can you kind of guesstimate how many they can actually take, like just space wise, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I start from big picture to small picture. If you're going into a facility, first off, okay, let's just start because this is general information, and especially hospital administrators love to be proud of this. How many beds do you have? And that's, big picture for them. And then just start drawing down from there, into specialties or capabilities. But yes, one thing I would always like to see if I'm bringing a patient or an injured patient into a facility, I want to see that receiving location. They may or may not have an emergency medicine specialty. That's another thing to remember. But like you said, Dennis, how many trauma bays do they have in that emergency room? How many nurses are on duty? How many doctors are on duty? How many patients are in the waiting room? How many receptionists? That all gives you those are all good common indicators as to what their capacity is. And that's all passive collection there. You don't even always have to ask those questions, especially if you don't want to embarrass anybody, or if you're, evolving your question matrix in order to gain a relationship. So just things to think about. You collect a lot of information with your eyes and not so much your mouth and your ears. So be proactive about that.
Yeah. And I mean, every facility, like they have a treatment room, but they have, a hallway off that treatment room.
Right.
And we see it all the time on social media. Patients are in the hallways, they're on beds and things like that. So I guess I want to ask the same question again, but you're thinking worst case scenario, like, I guess how much space do you just kind of go by, hey, a litter is roughly this size, or a bed is roughly this size, and just kind of do some quick nerd math there and figure out, like, yes, it has, 3 beds in here, but you could probably put 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think so. As long as we're augmenting, or as long as there is augmentation to that. But, I'll look at capacity by looking at equipment too, and making sure that they can do that. I've taken patients to Iraqi hospitals before, and although that was reactive at the time, you're looking at capacity just doesn't come with space. It comes with capability. It comes with, equipment. It comes with doctors. It comes with nurses. It comes with fluids. It comes with blood. It comes with equipment, So trying to see that and judge those things as well, I think is really important.
Yeah. And I mean, that can be part of, your MassCal kind of planning. It's like, okay, like this is the facility we might end up using. I know that they're going to need litters. They're going to need litter stands. They're going to need, and you make your own list, and now you have your own bundle that, hey, if the balloon goes up and we need to use this, like we're going to bring the patients and that kicker pallet.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
You know
Again,
what I mean?
augmenting. Yeah. You augment that in capability in order to increase capacity. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, absolutely. Yeah. One thing, if you are lucky enough to be in an area, that's highly resourced or has a developed structure in it, and you actually have helicopter patterns, we always went to the flight medics or the flight crews, because helicopters will very often do approaches into medical facilities. And if the medics are on the birds, they'll hop off just to do a quick screening. And that was always a real good way to get information across that common operating picture or across your running sketch. So look at the flight medics for their recce's and what facilities they felt good at and what they have seen too, because that always gives you a lot of real good insight. And they're constantly out there, and they have access that maybe you don't have as readily if it is a well-structured environment. That's always good for you too. Again, I want to reiterate that on those nights of increased risk, either operationally or in training, call those facilities. Make sure you can contact them. Make sure the jock can contact them, the medical advisor or the surgeon. If they don't answer, then they don't exist. Don't include them in your plan. And on that point, let's talk just a little bit about the TOC JOC and just what kind of assets are in there. I'm not sure what system has replaced Merck, and in NATO, we have the Medical Communications and Information System, MedSys, and that's basically an ongoing, updated by second status of all your medical facilities. It tells you if you're green, yellow, red, what your contact information is, and should allow you to contact them electronically immediately, and that's being monitored if you have that capability or need to. So those are systems that obviously nowadays can be portable and mobile along with you at all times. But look and make sure that you're integrated with those systems, that the information into those systems is important, and how readily accessible you have to those. Have a medical plan for any mission or movement. That goes without saying, but it's not just at the operational level. And when I say operational level, to me, or I think within a community standard, the medics, for most part, medic is responsible from the point of injury to the first level of competent surgical care. And the key word there being competent. And again, that only comes from an assessment. It doesn't come from an assumption. And you have to visit those areas. You have to make sure they're good. But in these geopolitical days now, you have to look larger than that. And you have to understand larger than that, even if you're not responsible or accountable for it. And you have to understand patient movement requests, or PMRs. In some nations call them patient evacuation requests, or PERs. And what these are is that official request for transfer, okay? And not only that, it requires a speed of transfer. There's some urgency level based in there, whether that's on the urgent, priority, and routine standard, but at a intercontinental level. Remember, though, by enabling or enacting a patient movement request or a patient evacuation request, you're turning over responsibility to conventional systems. And that might be a good thing. That might be a bad thing. And again, I'd like to give just not a war story. I dislike those, but just an experience that we learned very quickly from. We had a soldier come down with a fungal infection from a steroid that he had received maybe a week prior. And this guy went down, and he went down fast. Even so much where our doctors were very worried about his outcome. We engaged the patient movement request through normal evacuation systems, was told that we'd have a 12-hour inbound. That 12-hour turned into 24 hours. He was not going to make 24 hours. So we had to turn to the commander and ask for one of our own fixed wing to be released so that we could support that movement and higher treatment of that patient. And the outcome was excellent. But if we hadn't done that, those local military facilities there would not have been able to provide the supportive and critical care that he required. So again, that PACE plan at any level is important for the medic. And that is a joint team effort at every single level. One last thing about PMRs and PERs is they require specific information. And like I said, you're going to turn over that responsibility to conventional system, but they're going to require specific information. So ops, JAG, Intel might come into play there, just, depending on the mission or place. So, any experiences on that from yourself?
I guess none that I really had to facilitate myself, thankfully. I've had to, evac guys out of the country before, but as far as my part of it, they're like, thank you for getting them off the battlefield. We got it from here, But then again, I wasn't that smart, so I wouldn't depend on me either. So, yeah, like when just when you take a casualty, it's almost it can be a little overwhelming. Not just treating the casualty, but the number of people that want information from you,
right,
at all different levels.
Yes,
and it's not just like your next higher command level. It's like battalions, groups, siege SOTFs, and they want very specific information. And if you weren't prepared for that, it can be very, very overwhelming.
Yeah. And I will tell you too, based on the situation, based on urgency, and based on priority, just tell them they don't need it yet. They'll get it when they get it. And it's okay to say that. If you're caught up in something and group's calling you, hey, I'm not talking to you right now. Give me a day, or whatever the case may be. It's okay to say that. And I'll go back to, they have the expectation, the other side of the coin. They have that expectation where, 50% of medical information is wrong 100% of the time, and they're just trying to clarify. But they should have respect for what you're trying to accomplish, what your immediate command and operations is trying to accomplish, and in the care that you're trying to provide the patient. But again, I'll go back to, in these days, a medic needs to have a strategic understanding of the medevac plan, just because he's part of that plan. It's just like the medic is part of the operating room team. He or she is part of the surgical team. They are also part of the medical team, and they need to understand that strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of other things, just for the audience to understand, NATO has a patient evacuation coordination cell, and these are commonly referred to as PECs. If you've been in Africa, I'm sure you've seen a PEC on a COP. And basically that's something that you should dial into. It's a NATO level. That's a NATO theater level evacuation center. It's integrated into the NATO JOC, and it's used by all NATO nations in that area of responsibility. One thing to remember about this, though, PECs are usually manned by air guys. They're not manned by medical guys. So there's usually not an embedded medical advisor. So you're going to have to get your medical advisor or your command surgeon into play here, your 70 hotel, your planner into play here, just to make sure that there's good integration into there too. But a PEC, a patient evacuation coordination cell, is a great tool when it's available to you. One thing too we haven't talked about is civilian transportation. Yes, there are solutions that may be, and can be sourced from civilian providers to support operations. When military or domestic or host nation assets aren't available, and that can be a number. I'm not advocating for anybody, but just a number of examples is ISOS or Global Medical Solutions or Starlight. Any of these, being critical, being that safety officer. Remember, there is a procurement procedure here, and at the end of the day, these are businesses, and they are not always going to be as reactive as you wish them to be. And no matter what they say to you, no matter what they promise you, again, think about the worst case scenario. Whenever you put in a patient movement request with a civilian contractor, it goes through a bid process. There is a time to that bid process, because very often they go to 2 or 3 very close by platforms and they say, how much would it cost for you to do this? How much would it cost for you to do this? And then they'll take the lowest bidder and they'll go with that. That's going to take time. And it's going to complicate your plan. And it's going to have pieces of information in there that you don't control. And again, does it work? Yes. Does it work like you'd want it to, or as fast as you want it to? No. Please be cautious of that. Remember too, civilian transportation has a right of refusal. They can say no. Whether it's based on terrain, whether it's based on conflict, whether it's based on risk, or whether it's just based on whether I want to or not, they have a right of refusal. And so nothing is for sure. They have no duty to protect when it comes to that. Remember too, with patient movement, it requires a doctor-to-doctor interaction. A releasing doctor and a receiving doctor at the highest quality should have communication and an agreement on when the patient is stable enough to be removed, to be moved, and then what the doctor wants to see at the receiving facility. And not always will the civilian transportation assets facilitate that. That might be something that you have to do on your own. Remember too, with civilian transportation or civilian platforms in contract, you have to involve the host nation government with that, because you might need to get that civilian transportation approvals to land at a certain airport or a certain field strip somewhere. So just, think about that too. And the last thing, I've had this happen to me, is a contract aircraft will be double tasked. That aircraft lands to pick up your patient, and you look on an aircraft and another patient is already on there. So you might not be getting the level of care or the focus that you think or want to have. So again, it's a business. So be just conscientious of that.
One thing, if you don't mind it.
No, please.
Like, especially when you're talking about like, it takes time, just think about how many levels of things have gone wrong to now we're calling this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're absolutely right. It's not their emergency. It's your emergency. So if you're even starting to think that this is a possibility that we might have to do, you need to start pushing that information up faster. Not really that dissimilar to, calling like Rolo or I need another unit of blood from the team. As soon as you think you might end up having to do this, like, you need to start sending that information up.
You're absolutely right about that. Yes, sir. 100%. The sooner that more people know the information, the faster it's going to happen. 100%. Yeah, I mean, the pros to contract there, it can mitigate risk for the command. Yes, absolutely. It can provide a contingency plan, for stratovac. It can provide extra flexibility. Sure. And actually, sometimes they may have more access to some of these airstrips than we do because they are commonly in this area. The pilots know the area. They know the traffic control. They know the field crews. Yeah, so those are good things about them. Some cons, obviously, like we said before, the contract bidding process, it can be very administratively heavy. Secure means of communication, a theater need to reach back, to subject matter authority in order to restrict potential OPSEC breaches if possible. So all those things are considerations too. Another thing I just realized is a little late in this presentation, but rehearse your platforms when you get on the ground. And that's something simple, but it's absolutely essential. I don't know if you have Hiluxes. I don't know if you have some type of armored vehicle. I don't know if you're just using partner Land Rovers or even just rental vehicles or any type of air platform. But within that first week or first few days of being on the ground, you should rehearse a casualty exchange, a casualty movement. Do litters fit into it? Which vehicles do litters fit into? How is my, ruck truck plan look like? And where am I going to put my tiered logistical depth? And a real quick story on that. Several rotations into Iraq and Baghdad. Of course, we had a QRF, conventional guys, 2 M1s and 2 Bradleys, but they were the cavalry fighting vehicles. They weren't the infantry fighting vehicles. I remember going back in, and we always did rehearsals within the first few days while we were getting on schedule. And we line the vehicles up, and we just go to each vehicle and load and unload casualties and talk about where the med kit was. And remember going to the Bradley cavalry fighting vehicle and saying, okay, let's practice putting the litter on here. And the crew member's like, you can get a litter on here. Yeah, we can do it. We did it last time. Yes, the litter doesn't lay flat in a cavalry fighting vehicle. It is at an angle, but yes, it does fit. And yes, you can treat while it's in there. So, it's just, again, knowing your platforms, confirming your platforms, and rehearsals. So, but I think the last point to all this is just, like we said, we have to have a conscious idea and concept to those levels behind us. And that includes stratovac. In the United States, we look to things like Transcom for this, or the Air Force plans for a patient movement request, or like I said before, the NATO patient evacuation coordination cell. The allies have their own allied aircraft too, but it doesn't mean we can't use them as well. So just think about allied movement or allied evacuation control centers within, NATO, if you're not talking national. And in the Pacific, I'm sure that comes in a whole different color too, as well, when we look at our Five Eye allies out there as well. So, yeah. Any last thoughts, Dennis?
I mean, it really just comes down to just base principles. Like, if you didn't practice it, if you didn't plan for it, like, it's not going to happen. There's no magic genie that you can like uncork a bottle and he'll just fix all your problems for you. Right. If you have no input on this, it can get out of hand real quick. And, luckily you were part of an organization that had most levels kind of covered. But not everybody is like that. So, plan for things, talk to people, be friendly, understand the process. Just like get over your ego and just call somebody. Yes, they probably outrank you, but you're just planning. You're trying to take care of your guys. Ask honest questions. You're probably going to get honest answers about how this process actually works. You're going to be much more informed than everybody else around you because God knows they won't do it. And you're just going to have this much bigger comfort level is, if we take a casualty, this is going to be my aspect, and this is all the information I need to start pushing forward to give my guy the best care possible.
Yes, sir.
So just practice, call, talk to people, rehearse, just like literally anything else we do in the military. Do that, put that emphasis on the medical aspect, and you'll probably be all right.
Yes, sir. I remember it's not just, yes, I think we were spoiled and well-resourced, but even in geographic combat commands or the theater special operations commands, and I'll give you an example. In South Africa, when Jim Lynch was the command surgeon, I remember walking into that office, and in every single room they had a sign up, "Your job is to support the medic forward." And I thought that was a pretty critical and endearing way to think about it at that level. I know you feel this way, Dennis, and we want to look out for the young medics and the young physicians that are out there trying to do the right thing. And please learn from our own lessons and our own mistakes. Don't assume anything. Confirm everything. Be proactive. Be that safety officer. You just mentioned, Dennis, about calling up to somebody to ask a question. Remember, you're not making their job worse. You are doing your job, and you are forcing them to do their job. In reverse, they're going to look to you like, hey, that guy's proactive. He has my confidence. He's doing his job. I'm going to maintain communications with him, and I'm going to make sure I'm there to support him when he needs it. You're developing and establishing a relationship there. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to anybody for any reason at any time. So do that job because it is your job. Like we said before, don't be that traditional medical reactive. Be proactive. You're the safety officer. Look for everything that can go wrong, not what just might go wrong. Okay, that's really critical. And lastly, I think again, validate and rehearse every single thing, whether it's routes, facilities, contact numbers, where the keys for the vehicles are. The devil is in the details. And amateurs do it until they get it right. But professionals do it until they cannot get it wrong. And that's one of the differences between good and great. So always be the latter. Be the professionals until they cannot get it wrong. And you will be good.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you, Mike.
Yes, sir. That goes both ways, Dennis. We appreciate all you guys do in this effort.
That's it for today's podcast. Make sure to go to our website, www.prolongedfieldcare.org. Check out our free downloads and a ton of other helpful information. Grab a bag of our fresh roasted PFC coffee, links in the description below, and stay on the bleeding edge of combat and austere medicine. This is Dennis for the PFC Podcast, out.